We stormed into a funeral mass in the Philippines to stop Christians from praying, but something happened in that church that none of us could explain. What did Jesus do in that moment that made one of the Muslim men who interrupted the service question everything he believed about God? My name is Ibrahim, and I am 32 years old. I grew up in the southern Philippines where the air smells like salt from the sea and the call to prayer rises over the rooftops 5 times a day. My earliest memory is standing beside my father before sunrise while he spread a thin green prayer rug on the cool tile floor of our small home. The sky outside the window was still dark blue and the roosters had not started crowing yet. My father's voice was soft but firm as he told me to stand straight and face the right direction. Even as a small boy, I felt that prayer was the center of our life. Our house sat near the edge of our barangay. Coconut trees lined the dirt road outside, and children often ran past in the afternoons chasing old tires with sticks. On clear days, we could hear the church bells from the Christian town 2 kilometers away. When those bells rang, my father would sometimes pause and shake his head slowly. They are good people, he once told me when I was 10, but they do not know the truth about God. I believed him with all my heart. My father was not a rich man. He worked at a small repair shop fixing fishing engines, his hands always dark with oil and grease. But in our community, he was respected because of his faith. Every Friday, he walked to the mosque wearing a clean white shirt and a calm look on his face. People would greet him with quiet respect. When I was old enough, I began walking with him. The mosque was about 700 meters from our house. We would leave just before sunset prayer, when the sky turned orange over the palm trees. The path was narrow and dusty, and sometimes we passed groups of Christian boys playing basketball near the schoolyard. They laughed loudly and shouted to each other in Cebuano. I remember watching them for a moment and wondering what their lives were like. But my father would gently place his hand on my shoulder and guide me forward. "Keep your mind on prayer," he would say. Inside the mosque, the air felt cool and still. The floor smelled faintly of woven mats. I loved the quiet there, the feeling that we had stepped away from the busy world outside. By the time I was 15, my life followed a strict rhythm. School in the morning, helping my father at the shop in the afternoon, and prayer in the evening. My friends sometimes joked that I was too serious. They spent their weekends riding motorbikes along the coast or swimming in the river near the hills. But I believed my purpose was different. I believed faith came first. When I turned 25, a new group began meeting in our town. They called themselves Defenders of Islamic Identity. At first, their gatherings were small, just a few men sitting on plastic chairs behind a small store after evening prayer. They spoke about protecting our community and standing strong against what they called outside influence. I listened quietly during my first meeting, but the more I listened, the more their words stirred something deep inside me. They spoke about churches growing larger. They spoke about Christian teachers visiting nearby villages. They spoke about Muslims slowly forgetting their traditions. Their voices were calm, but their message was strong. "If we stay silent," one man said during a meeting, "our children may grow up without knowing the truth." That idea scared me. I began attending every meeting. Soon I was helping organize small protests outside public events. We carried signs and spoke loudly about protecting our faith. Most days nothing serious happened. People argued for a while, then everyone went home. But inside me, a quiet fire was growing. I believed we were soldiers in a spiritual battle. One hot afternoon in early June of 2019, I was repairing a small boat engine with my father when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Sweat ran down my back as I wiped my hands on a rag and read the message. Emergency meeting tonight. I knew it was from our activist group. That evening, the sky turned dark gray as a storm moved across the hills. Thunder rolled far away as I walked to the small room behind the store where we held our meetings. The air felt thick with heat and tension. About 15 men were already there. Our leader stood near the front of the room. His face looked serious, and the small fan on the wall buzzed loudly as it pushed warm air around us. "There will be a large funeral mass tomorrow," he said slowly. The room grew quiet. He explained that a well-known Christian teacher had died. His funeral would take place at a Catholic church just outside our community. People were expected to travel from many villages to attend. Then he said something that made my heart begin to pound. This man spent years spreading Christian teaching near Muslim villages, our leader said. If we allow this funeral to pass quietly, it will look like we accept their message. A murmur moved through the room. Someone asked what we should do. The leader folded his arms and looked at each of us one by one. "We will go there," he said. Another man asked if we meant standing outside with signs. The leader shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "we will go inside the church." The words hung in the air like heavy smoke. Even for our group, that idea felt bold. Interrupting a funeral mass was not just protest, it was direct confrontation. But instead of fear, I felt a strange rush of energy. I believed we were about to defend our faith in a powerful way. The leader continued explaining the plan. We would arrive just after the service began. Some of us would speak loudly, others would challenge the priest. The goal was to stop the service and make a strong statement. As the rain began tapping against the metal roof above us, I imagined the scene in my mind. A room full of Christians suddenly facing men who refused to stay silent. My heart beat faster with every passing minute. That night, after the meeting ended, I walked home through wet streets shining under the dim yellow streetlights. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled fresh and cool. Inside our house, my father was already asleep. I sat quietly at the small table near the window and stared into the dark night outside. Tomorrow we would walk into a church. Tomorrow we would challenge people who believed in a different way. At that moment, I felt completely certain that we were doing the right thing. I had no idea that within 24 hours, I would witness something inside that church that would shake my faith to its core. And I had no idea that the name of Jesus, the very name we planned to challenge that day, was about to follow me long after the funeral ended. But tell me something honestly. Have you ever been so sure you were defending the truth, only to discover that you were standing on the edge of something that could change everything you believed? The next morning, the sky was gray and heavy, like the clouds were sitting low over the town. I woke before sunrise, but not for prayer. My heart was beating too fast for sleep. The room felt warm and quiet, and the sound of waves from the distant shore drifted through the window. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my hands. Today we would go to the church. Today we would stop the funeral. For a moment I felt a small, knot on my stomach, but I pushed it away. I told myself that this was important. I told myself we were doing the right thing. After morning prayer, I stepped outside. The ground was still damp from the rain the night before. Small puddles reflected the pale morning light. I walked down the narrow road toward the meeting spot where our group had agreed to gather. By the time I arrived, most of the men were already there. 12 of us stood under a small tin roof beside a closed store. Some leaned against their motorbikes. Others spoke in low voices. Our leader stood near the edge of the road with his arms folded across his chest. No one laughed, no one joked. The mood was serious. "Remember," he said quietly when I walked closer, "we speak loudly, but we do not touch anyone. We make our point and show them we are not afraid." Several men nodded. One of them held a folded sign under his arm. Another carried a small speaker in his backpack. I could feel the tension moving through the group like electricity. The church was not far away, only about 1 kilometer down the road. We began walking together just after 9 in the morning. The town was already awake. Motorbikes buzzed past us. Vendors opened small food stalls. A few people stared at us as we passed, perhaps sensing something strange in the way we moved together. I could see the church roof long before we reached it. It was painted red and stood above the nearby houses. A tall white cross rose above the front door. As we drew closer, I noticed cars parked along both sides of the road. Many people had come. Men and women dressed in black walked slowly toward the entrance. Some held white flowers, others wiped tears from their eyes. A funeral is a quiet thing, but our group was not quiet. Our leader gave a short nod, and we walked straight toward the front door. No one stopped us. No one even realized what we were about to do. Inside the church, the air felt cool and still. The sunlight passed through tall glass windows and painted soft colors on the wooden floor. Rows of long benches filled the room. Nearly 200 people sat in silence. At the front stood a simple wooden coffin surrounded by white flowers. A priest stood beside it, reading softly from a book. The sound of his voice echoed gently through the room. For a moment, everything felt calm, peaceful. Then our leader raised his hand, and everything changed. One of the men beside me stepped forward and shouted loudly, "Your teaching is wrong." The words crashed through the quiet room like thunder. People gasped, heads turned quickly toward us. Another man lifted his sign high above his head and began shouting verses from the Quran. His voice was loud and sharp against the soft music that had been playing. Suddenly the church filled with noise. Some people stood up from their seats. Others shouted for us to leave. Just a woman near the front began crying, harder than before, covering her face with both hands. But we did not stop. Our leader walked a few steps down the center aisle and pointed toward the cross above the altar. "You worship a man," he shouted. "That is not the true God." I felt my own voice rise as anger pushed me forward. "This is false teaching," I shouted. The room felt hot now. Voices bounced off the walls. Someone near the back began recording the scene on a phone, where several men from the church rushed toward us. "Stop this!" one of them yelled, but our leader refused to move. Then something unexpected happened. The priest stepped forward slowly. He did not shout. He did not show anger. Instead, he raised one hand gently. "My friends," he said in a calm voice, "this family is grieving. Please let them mourn in peace." His voice was steady, soft, but our leader shook his head. We will not be silent while lies are spoken. The tension in the room grew thicker with every second. I could see anger on many faces now. Some men looked ready to push us outside by force. A few women were crying loudly near the front row. The priest looked at each of us one by one. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "Even now," he said quietly, "Jesus loves you." Those words felt like a spark falling into dry grass. My anger flared. I stepped forward, ready to argue. But before I could speak, the lights above us flickered. Once, twice. The soft music stopped. For a brief moment, the whole church fell silent. The only sound was the faint buzz of the ceiling fans turning slowly above us. I felt a strange chill move across my skin. The priest stood still. The people in the benches watched quietly. Even the men in my group stopped shouting. Something in the air had changed. I could not explain it, but it felt like the whole room was holding its breath. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but those seconds felt longer than any moment I could remember. Then the lights steadied again. Voices slowly returned. People began whispering to one another, and just as our leader opened his mouth to shout again, a sudden cry came from the front row. A woman had fallen to the floor. At first, it looked like she had fainted. Several family members rushed to her side. "Maria! Maria!" someone shouted. Her body lay still on the wooden floor. The room filled with worried voices. "Call an ambulance! Give her space!" The chaos that we had started suddenly changed into something else. Fear, real fear. The priest knelt beside the woman quickly. One of the men near her checked for a pulse. His face turned pale. "She's not breathing," he whispered. A cold feeling moved through my chest. This was not what we came here for. The anger that had filled me only moments before began to fade. The priest closed his eyes and placed his hand gently on the woman's shoulder. And as the church filled with worried voices and crying family members, he began to pray, softly, calmly. "Lord Jesus," he whispered. I stood frozen in the center aisle, watching everything unfold. Just minutes earlier, we had walked into that church, believing we were in control. But now something else was happening, something none of us had planned. And as the priest continued to pray over the woman lying motionless on the floor, a strange thought entered my mind. What if the moment we came to disrupt this funeral was the exact moment something far greater was about to begin? Tell me honestly, have you ever walked into a place ready for a fight, only to realize you were about to witness something that could change your life forever? I watched the priest lean closer to the woman on the floor. His hand rested gently on her chest, and the calm in his voice seemed to spread through the room like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. The crowd around us murmured nervously, unsure whether to step forward or stay back. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears. I had never felt such stillness in the middle of chaos. The woman's body shivered faintly. A single tear rolled down her cheek, as if she could sense something beyond our shouting, beyond our anger. The priest whispered something I could not hear, but I felt it in my chest. It was like a quiet river of peace flowing through the tension that had gripped me moments before. I glanced at the men in my group. Their faces were pale, eyes wide. Even our leader looked confused, uncertain for the first time. A crack of doubt appeared in him, like a spider web forming across a once solid wall. None of us had expected this. None of us had imagined our anger could meet silence and calm so powerful it almost burned our hands to touch. Then the impossible happened. The woman's fingers twitched. Slowly she blinked her eyes open. The room gasped as if the air itself had been sucked out and replaced with something lighter. A small, shaky breath escaped her lips. The priest smiled gently. "She is awake," he said softly. The words seemed to fall like warm rain on dry soil. I took a step forward without thinking. My voice caught in my throat. How did this happen?" I whispered to no one in particular. My group stood frozen, some shaking their heads, some staring at the woman like she had become a vision. The flowers near the coffin seemed brighter somehow. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass painted patterns on the floor, dancing across the people's faces. It was as though the room had been transformed in seconds. Our leader moved suddenly. He pointed at the priest, anger returning to his voice, but it sounded different, less sure. "This is not right. You're using tricks. Stop this." He strode forward, but when he saw the calm in the priest's eyes, he faltered. The woman reached out a trembling hand, her eyes wide and clear, as if she could see something invisible. To all of us, I felt something inside me shift. My hands unclenched, my jaw relaxed. I remembered the words he had spoken earlier. "Even now, Jesus loves you." Those words had sounded simple, almost ordinary, but in that moment, they held a weight I could not ignore. Could love be stronger than anger? Could a calm and quiet voice truly undo years of fear and hatred in minutes? The priest helped the woman to her feet. She swayed slightly, gripping his arm for balance. The crowd clapped softly, unsure, hesitant, but hopeful. I noticed tears on the faces of people who had only moments ago glared at us with fear. Something unseen had moved in the room, something larger than any of us. I took another step. My voice came out louder this time. I don't understand. How can this be real?" The question trembled in the air. Our group exchanged glances, the tension between us cracking like ice on a frozen pond. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to run, to escape this place and the overwhelming power I could not name. But another part of me stayed, rooted, curious, desperate to know what had just happened. The woman looked at me. Her gaze was steady. "He saved me," she said, and her voice was soft, but I felt it reach into my chest. Though she did not point at anyone else. She did not say it was the priest. She said he. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard. That simple word carried weight. I could feel it pressing against my chest, against the walls I had built around my mind and my heart. I glanced at my leader. He was silent now, staring at the woman as if he could not breathe. The anger had left him entirely, replaced by confusion, fear, and something fragile like wonder. One by one, the other men lowered their heads. The words they had shouted just minutes ago seemed distant, meaningless, like echoes of a different life. I took another step toward the front of the church, and my knees shook. I could feel the eyes of the congregation on me, not with fear, but with something I could not name. Acceptance, hope? I did not know. I only knew I could not turn away. The calm that had filled the room touched me now. It filled my chest and my stomach. My hands no longer shook, but I felt raw, exposed, like a man standing in the middle of a storm that had just passed. The priest looked at me, and for the first time, he spoke directly to me. "Do you see it now?" he asked, his voice gentle. I wanted to nod. I wanted to shout yes. I wanted to run and fall at his feet. But my mind was too full of questions, too full of wonder. I think I do, I whispered. Then the woman held out her hand to the congregation. One by one, people approached her, some bowing, some wiping their eyes, some kneeling. I stepped forward slowly. When I touched her hand, a warmth spread from my fingertips through my entire body. My heart pounded, my soul felt unsteady, and yet it felt like the safest place I had ever been. I realized then that everything I had believed about power, control, and anger was suddenly empty. The calm and love I had witnessed, something I could not explain, was stronger than anything I had ever known. The priest continued praying softly. The room remained filled with a quiet, almost holy energy, like a river moving under the floorboards, unseen, unstoppable. I turned my eyes to the cross above the altar. I had seen it many times before, but never like this. Never with the weight of truth pressing down on me, the proof of something greater than human anger or fear. Could I believe it? Could I trust it? My entire life, the certainty I had clung to was unraveling, thread by thread. I felt the first tear slip down my cheek. I did not wipe it away. I did not care who saw. I felt it burn, but it was not pain. It was release. Something inside me had cracked open, and I did not want it closed again. And as I looked at the woman standing in front of the church, healed and alive, and at the priest whose quiet power had moved us all, I asked myself the question that would not leave my mind. If love and peace are stronger than anger and hatred, then could I truly let it change me? I could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven, as I stepped closer to the altar. The sunlight slanted through the stained glass, scattering red and blue shards across the wooden floor, and I felt as if the colors were pressing against my skin. The warmth on my hands and face was almost painful, but it was not the heat of anger or fear. It was a calm warmth, steady and deep, like something alive reaching out to touch me. The woman who had been healed stood to the side, her eyes wide and calm. She smiled faintly, and for the first time, I understood that her smile was not for me. It was for something larger, something I could not name. The priest's hands moved slowly over the altar, and I realized that even his movements were different now, slower, deliberate, as if each gesture carried the weight of heaven. I turned to look at my companions. Some were sitting on the pews, hands clasped tightly in front of them, eyes fixed on the scene at the front. Others were still standing, frozen like statues, their faces pale and drawn. I noticed a trembling in their hands, a quiet hesitation that I had never seen before. The anger that had driven us here was gone, replaced by something fragile and new. I stepped forward, my feet heavy against the floor, and my mind raced. Every word I had shouted in anger, every insult and threat now seemed like the echo of a different life. Could a single act of love undo all that? Could peace be stronger than hatred? I did not have answers, only a sense of urgency pressing against my chest. The woman moved toward me, and when our eyes met, I felt my heart skip a beat. She did not speak, but I could feel her presence, warm and steady. It was as if she was holding space for me, waiting for me to decide what I would do next. The priest's voice rose softly, a quiet chant that seemed to wrap around the room, and I realized that the sound itself was healing. I looked at my companions again. One by one, They were lowering their heads, their eyes closing as if they were listening to the voice of something beyond. The tension in the air shifted like clouds moving away from the sun, and I felt it sweep over me, lifting the weight from my chest. My hands unclenched, my jaw relaxed, and for the first time in my life, I could feel my own soul breathing. A sudden movement drew my attention. Our leader stepped forward, his face pale and unsteady. His fists were clenched, but he did not shout. He looked at the priest, then at the woman, then back at me. I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in the armor of certainty he had always carried. He opened his mouth, then closed it, and I could see him wrestling with something inside, something he had never faced before. I realized then that I was not alone in my struggle. The room was full of people, each of us standing on the edge of something new, something terrifying and beautiful. The air was thick with possibility, like the calm before a storm or the quiet after the rain. I could hear my heart beat steady now, not racing with fear but alive with anticipation. The priest stepped closer to our leader, his hand outstretched. "Do you trust him?" he asked, and the question echoed through the room. I saw our leader's eyes widen. He shook his head, then nodded slowly, a tear slipping down his cheek. The tension in his body released, and I felt it in my own chest. It was a ripple of relief and wonder spreading through me. I stepped forwards again, and my companions followed, hesitant but drawn by something they could not name. The woman reached out, her hand brushing mine, and warmth surged through my body, a burning calm that settled deep in my chest. I felt the years of anger, doubt, and fear wash away, leaving a quiet space I had never known. The sunlight shifted, painting golden patterns across the floor. I could hear the soft whispers of people praying, thus voices blending into a gentle hum that filled every corner of the church. The scent of incense floated in the air, rich and calming, and I breathed it in deeply, feeling it settle in my lungs like a promise. I looked at the cross above the altar, and my heart ached, not with sorrow but with longing. The words I had once resisted now echoed in my mind. "Even now, he loves you." I realized that love could not be measured by anger or fear. It was something stronger, deeper, unstoppable. I felt it pressing against my chest, urging me to let go, to surrender, to trust. My companions were moving closer, each of us drawn toward the front, toward the light, toward something we could not explain. The priest's voice rose again, and I felt the sound vibrate through my bones, filling every empty space inside me. The woman smiled at me again, and I knew that I was not alone. We were all standing together on the edge of a new life, a new understanding. And then I realized the question that had been burning in my heart all along. If love could reach this deep, if peace could heal what anger had broken, then could I let it change everything about me? Could I finally trust what I had always resisted? The church was quiet now, the kind of quiet that feels alive, as if the walls themselves were breathing. I stepped forward, my bare feet brushing against the cool, smooth floor, and felt a warmth spread through my chest. The woman reached out her hand and I took it, my fingers trembling. Around us, my companions were kneeling, some with tears sliding down their cheeks, some with eyes wide in wonder. I could hear the soft murmur of prayers rising like smoke, curling and twisting through the sunlight that poured through the stained glass. I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting, a darkness fleeing. The anger I had carried for years melted, replaced by a calm I had never known. My voice shook, and I whispered words I had never imagined saying, words of forgiveness, of surrender, of trust. The priest's gentle gaze met mine, and I felt his blessing without a word spoken. Outside, the sounds of the world continued, but inside the church, everything had changed. I looked at my companions and saw hope reflected in their eyes, a quiet joy that could not be denied. And in that moment, I knew beyond all doubt that love had won. Could I live the rest of my life holding this peace, letting it guide every step I take?